My wife called me a loser in front of 100 people. In front of her lover, who held her by the waist and explained to me that real men earn their own money. For 3 years I was silent. For 3 years she did not know with whom she shared the bed. For 3 years I waited for her to love me, and not what I own. That evening I asked her for one thing, to introduce me to the owner of the company where she works. She laughed and said that he does not visit such events. She laughed in vain. She didn't know who she had been living with for the last 3 years. She didn't know that the person she had just humiliated could destroy her with one call. Before we continue, I have a request to you. If you appreciate stories where justice wins, subscribe to the channel and press the bell. Like and then write in the comments, does this wife deserve what awaits her? And now we continue. I hate corporate parties. I hate plastic smiles, false compliments, and alcohol, which loosens the tongues of people who do not know how to keep their mouths shut. But Megan insisted, and I agreed, because for the last 3 months she was returning home later, smiling less and less, looking at me as if I were furniture that should have been thrown away long ago, but I couldn't get around to it. I hoped that this evening would change something. I hoped that she would see in me the man she met 3 years ago in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Then she worked as a waitress, and I pretended that I was just a remote IT specialist. She laughed at my jokes, not knowing that my company was already worth $150 million. I fell in love with her laughter, with her simplicity, with the way she looked at me without calculators in her eyes. Now I stood at the entrance to the hotel banquet hall Elite Farm, in her usual jeans and shirt, and she was already inside, in a dress that cost more than her first month's salary as a waitress. In a dress that I paid for, like a car, like an apartment, like her new career in the marketing department of Nextech, a company that she did not even know belonged to her husband. The hall was sparkling with lights, the music was loud enough to drown out idle conversations, and the waiters scurried between tables with trays of champagne. 200 people, the best employees of the company that I created from scratch after my ex-partner stole everything from me and ran away to competitors 5 years ago. After that betrayal, I swore that no one would recognize my face again, neither journalists, nor investors, nor my own employees. I managed through a holding company, through proxies, through legal structures that protected my anonymity more reliably than any safe. I searched Megan's eyes and found her at the bar. She was standing too close to a tall man in an expensive suit. His hand was on her waist, and she did not move away. She laughed like she had not laughed with me for the last 6 months. Dylan Prescott, Regional Director of the West Coast. I knew his file by heart. 36 years old, divorced, ambitious to a fault, results are stable. I myself signed his promotion for 8 months. Back. Now his fingers were touching my wife's back, and she was clinging to him as if I did not exist. I approached slowly, calmly. Something was burning inside me, but outside I was colder than a January morning. Megan noticed me, and something flashed in her eyes. Not joy, not relief, irritation. As if I had interfered with something important. She turned to the group of people nearby and uttered words that I will remember for the rest of my life. Meet my loser husband. Laughter. Loud, sincere, cruel. 10 people laughed at the man who paid them a salary. They didn't know it. But she knew that I was her husband, and that was enough to understand who she had become. Dylan did not remove his hand from her waist. Instead, he looked down at me and added, "No offense, buddy. It's just that real men earn their own money." I could have hit him, I could have made a scene. I could tell everyone who I am and watch the color drain from their faces. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I grinned and turned to my wife. "Introduce me to the owner of the company," I said calmly. Megan rolled her eyes. He never comes to corporate events, she answered in the tone with which they explain obvious things to small children. Even the top managers haven't seen him. They say he is paranoid. Today came, I said. She wanted to answer something sarcastic, but at that moment a woman in a strict gray suit approached us. Rachel Tanaka, my financial director. The only person in the company, besides the lawyers, who knew my real face. We agreed that she would not approach me at the corporate party, but apparently the situation required intervention. Mr. Wallace, Rachel said in an even voice, nodding at me with respect that cannot be faked, the documents for tomorrow's meeting are ready. I'll be waiting for you at 9 in the morning. She left as quickly as she appeared. But the damage was done. Megan looked at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. How does the financial director know your name? Why is she talking to you like that? I didn't answer. I just took out my phone and called a taxi. In the corner of the hall, a young guy from the sales department was filming something on his phone. I noticed it in my peripheral vision, but didn't attach any importance. Little did I know then that in a few hours 300,000 people would see my humiliation. The way home passed in silence. Megan tried to say something twice, but I looked out the window at the city at night and didn't react. I needed time to digest what happened. Neither her words, nor the laughter of strangers. The way her hand lay on his arm, the way she pressed herself against him. The way she looked at him in a way that she hadn't looked at me for a long time. 3 months ago I began to notice strange things. Late returns, a closed phone, sudden business trips. But I convinced myself that this was paranoia, that I was projecting onto her the betrayal of my ex-partner. That Megan was different. A week ago I asked the security service to check on her corporate correspondence. It was legal, technically, because the servers belonged to my company, and the security policy allowed monitoring. Morally, I don't know. But I should have known the truth. Correspondence with Dylan Prescott began 3 months ago. First work, then personal, then intimate. Photos of breakfasts on business trips that were not in her work schedule. Room reservations on his corporate card, disguised as business expenses. I read their messages and felt like something was dying inside. Not love. Love died before. I just didn't want to admit it. Hope died. The belief that you can find a person who will love you for who you are, and not for what you have. At home, I silently walked into the guest room and began to pack my things. Megan stood in the doorway, crossing her arms over her chest. What are you doing? What's happening? Who is this woman? You'll find out tomorrow, I answered without looking up. Like everyone else. Grant. She grabbed my hand. I demand an explanation. Why does the CFO of a huge company talk to you like your boss? I looked at her hand on my wrist. The same hand that lay on another man's shoulder today. Then I looked into her eyes, because I'm her boss, Megan. I'm the boss of everyone in this company. Including your lover. I released my hand and closed the door in her face. I spent the next 2 hours on the laptop. Holding management system. Documents for the marriage contract, which she signed 3 years ago without reading, because she was sure she's marrying a penniless programmer. Legal opinions on property rights. Evidence of her affair with Dylan. At 3 o'clock in the morning a message came from Rachel, check the news. This is urgent. I opened Twitter. The hashtag #loserhusband was trending. The video from the corporate party, where my wife introduced me to the crowd to general laughter, received 100,000 views and continued to grow. Comments ranged from sympathy to ridicule. Poor man. What a humiliation. He was a complete loser, he would have divorced a long time ago. One comment caught my attention. A user with the nickname Investor Analyst wrote, "Wait, Wallace, my wife works at Nextech. That's the name of the Holding S founder. Has anyone checked?" There were already 50 replies under the comment. People were digging. By morning they will get to the bottom of the truth. At 3:15 a.m. message came from Victor Lawrence, owner of 15 of Nextech shares and the only person who has been trying to oust me from his own company for years. "Did you see the video? We need to talk. Urgently." A minute later, a second message, "The board of directors may consider you a toxic asset. I am ready to buy out your share at a good price. Think while there is time." I looked at the screen. The video continued to gain views. 120,000. 150. Every minute someone new watched as my wife called me a loser. And her lover explained that real men earn their own money. I took off the wedding ring and put it on the table. The gold band that 3 years ago seemed a symbol of something real. Now it was just a piece of metal, a reminder of my naivety. Then I opened the company management system and pressed the button to call an emergency meeting of the board of directors. Tomorrow everything will change. Megan will find out who she married. Dylan will find out whose wife he touched with his hands. Victor will find out that I am not going to give away what I built. And the internet will find out that the loser husband from a viral video owns a company worth $250 million. I closed the laptop and lay down on the bed in the guest room. It was quiet behind the wall. Megan was either asleep, or crying, or writing to her Dylan. I didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, I really didn't care. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark of the guest room, looking at the ceiling until the first rays of the sun began to break through the blinds. Memories were spinning in my head that I had been trying to bury for years. 5 years ago I was a different person. A naive idiot who believed that talent and integrity win in business. My partner, Caroline Webster, was a brilliant marketer. I was an engineer with ideas. And together we built the first version of the platform that would become the basis of Nextech. We worked 18 hours a day, ate Chinese food out of boxes and dreamed of changing the industry. One morning I came into the office to find the servers empty. Caroline copied all the code, all the documentation, all the developments. Disappeared. 2 weeks later she surfaced as the technical director of our main competitor. My code, my ideas, my year and a half of work without days off, everything was stolen. And nothing could be proven because I was too stupid to file patents and protect intellectual property. I lost everything. Investors fled, creditors were knocking on the door. I was one step away from bankruptcy and thought Abuto just give up. But instead I got angry. A cold, calculated anger that doesn't burn from within, but turns into fuel. I started again. Alone. Without partners, without investors, without anyone's help. Wrote new code, better than the previous one. Created a holding structure that protected my name and face. Hired Rachel Tanaka, the only person I could trust, because her previous employer had also been betrayed by a partner, and she understood the price of loyalty. 3 years later, Nextech was worth $50 million. 4 years later, 100. Now almost 300, and we were preparing to go public. And then Megan appeared. I walked into that cafe by chance, hiding from the rain. She brought me coffee, smiled as if I was the only person in a crowded room. We started talking. She talked about her dreams of becoming a marketer, about courses she couldn't afford, about her mother who was sick and needed expensive medications. I listened, felt something that I hadn't felt in years. I didn't tell her who I was. Introduced myself as a freelancer working from home. She didn't ask about money, wasn't interested in my car or apartment. Her eyes lit up when I talked about technology, and not when I paid the bill. 6 months later we got married. I paid for her education, got her a job at Nextech through a recruitment agency so that no one would suspect the connection. I bought a house, but registered it as a holding company. All my property belonged to legal structures, not to me personally. And she signed the marriage contract without reading it, because she was sure that a remote programmer had nothing share. For 3 years I kept a secret. For 3 years I believed that this was right. That one day, when the time comes, I will tell her everything, and she will understand, and we will laugh about it together. Yesterday she called me a loser in front of 100 people and snuggled up to another man. At 6 in the morning I took a shower, put on a suit that I had not taken out of the closet for 2 years, and looked at myself in the mirror. A stranger was looking at me from the reflection. Hard, cold of the person I swore I would never become. But sometimes circumstances leave no choice. When I left the room, Megan was already in the kitchen. She froze with a cup of coffee in her hand, looking at my suit as if she had seen a ghost. "What's going on?" she asked carefully. "Where are you going?" "To work," I answered, and walked past her to the door. "Grant, wait." She caught up with me in the hallway. "What you said last night. That you are the boss of everyone in the company. It was a joke, right? You couldn't She didn't finish. I saw the gears spinning in her head, putting together the pieces of a puzzle that she had ignored for 3 years. My unclear income, my uncertain job. The way the financial director of a multi-million-dollar company spoke to me yesterday. "Your working day starts at 9, I said, without answering her question. "Don't be late. There will be an important meeting today." I left without looking back. On the way to the office, I checked my phone. The video received 400,000 views. The hashtag #loserhusband was still trending, but now a new one was added to it. Who is Wallace? Journalists dug, bloggers built theories, and somewhere in the depths of the internet, someone had already figured out the connection between my last name and the Nextech holding structure. Rachel met me in an underground parking lot, which had never happened. Did before. Her face was unreadable, but I knew her long enough to notice the worry in her eyes. Victor called an informal meeting with minority shareholders at 7 o'clock sharp, she said as we walked to the service elevator. He shows them a video and talks about reputational risks. The pension fund, which owns 8% of our shares, has already asked for comment. I nodded, not breaking stride. Victor Lawrence was a thorn in my side. From the very beginning. He joined the company 4 years ago when I needed money to scale, and since then he has methodically tried to expand his influence. 15% shares, a seat on the board of directors, and an insatiable thirst for control. He has been looking for an excuse to get rid of me for years, and yesterday I presented him with this reason on a silver platter. "What is he offering?" I asked. Rachel handed me a tablet with an open letter. Victor proposed that the board of directors consider temporarily removing me from the position of CEO until the investigation into the impact of the public scandal on the company's reputation is completed. The letter already had 3 signatures of minority shareholders. "He has 35% of the votes," said Rachel. "He needs 16 more to get a majority. The pension fund will not vote for my removal while it sees the numbers," I answered, entering the elevator. "Show them the numbers." Rachel allowed herself a small smile. "The presentation is ready. Third quarter, plus 23% growth. Forecast for the fourth, 30. Pre-tax profit increased 40% compared to last year." That was my trump card. The numbers don't lie, and as long as the company is growing at this rate, no sane investor would change management because of a viral video about family problems. The elevator stopped on the 42nd floor, and the doors opened to my personal hell. The whole office was looking at me. 200 people, who just yesterday did not know my face, now recognized it thanks to a viral video. I saw whispers, rounded eyes, phones that were hastily put away in pockets. Someone looked with sympathy, someone with curiosity, someone with poorly hidden bloating. I walked across the entire floor without lowering my eyes and without slowing down. Let them look, let them whisper. In an hour they will know who I am, and their whispering will change. At the door, Victor Lawrence was waiting for me in the conference room. Tall, graying, with the smile of a man who was confident in his victory. He extended his hand to shake, and I shook it, because in business emotions are a weakness that cannot be shown. "Grant," he said with feigned sympathy. "It's a hard night, as I understand it. My offer is still valid. Sell me the share, leave quietly, maintain your dignity. In a week this video will be forgotten, and you can start again somewhere away from the cameras." I looked into his eyes and saw there what he was trying to hide: hunger, greed. He had been waiting for this moment for years, and now he thought that I was broken. "Victor," I answered calmly. "I built this company from scratch after I was betrayed by people I trusted. Do you think a viral video will break me?" His smile wavered a little, but he quickly pulled himself together. "I'm just offering a way out, Grant. A decent way out. The board of directors meets in 15 minutes, and I can't guarantee the result of the vote." I let go of his hand and walked into the room. The board members were already seated around a long table. 7 people, on whose decisions the future of the company I'd been building for 5 years depended. Rachel took a seat to my right, putting folders with financial statements on the table. At 9:05, the conference room doors opened and Megan walked in. She was pale, but she was standing straight. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw fear, confusion, and something like hope in her gaze. Hope that this would all turn out to be a misunderstanding, that her husband could not be who she began to suspect him to be. Dylan Prescott stood next to her. The same Dylan who hugged my wife yesterday and explained to me that real men earn their own money. Now he looked confused, not understanding why he was called to a meeting of the board of directors, where regional managers are not usually invited. Victor sat in the chair opposite me, folding his hands on the table. He looked smug, like a man who had already counted the votes and knew the result. I stood up. "Good morning," I said, looking around those present. "My name is Grant Wallace. I am the founder and owner controlling stake in this company." Silence. Megan grabbed the back of the nearest chair. Dylan opened his mouth and closed it again, unable to find words. Even Victor lost his composure for a moment, although he, of course, knew the truth for a long time. "Many of you saw yesterday's video," I continued. "Many of you recognized me from this video as the man my wife called a loser. I have gathered you here to clarify." I pressed the button on remote control, and the first slide of the presentation appeared on the screen behind me. Nextech's financial performance for the last 5 years. A growth curve going up at such an angle that it seemed almost vertical. This is what I built while I was a loser. Revenue growth 300% over 5 years. Profit growth 500%. Company valuation before IPO $270 million. Next slide. Third quarter results. Yesterday, Mr. Lawrence suggested that the board consider removing me due to reputational risks. I looked at Victor. Here is my answer to reputational risks: 23% growth. Forecast for the fourth quarter, 30. If anyone thinks that viral videos from my personal life are more important than these numbers, I am ready to listen to the arguments. No one said a word. Now about the personal, I said, and my voice became a little quieter. Megan Wallace, my wife, works at marketing department of this company. As of today, we are getting divorced. For personal reasons that do not concern anyone in this room. I looked at Megan. She was crying. Silently, without wiping away the tears that flowed down her cheeks. Part of me wanted to go to her, comfort her, tell her that everything would be fine. But that part died yesterday, when she was snuggling with another man and laughing at her husband. Her position in the company will not change, I continued. She's a competent employee, and personal circumstances should not influence the professional assessment. I turned to Victor. I have another announcement. Mr. Lawrence offered to buy out my share in the company. I have a counter-offer. Victor tensed. I am ready to buy out the share of any shareholder who considers me a toxic asset, I said, at the market price plus 10% premium. The offer is valid for 48 hours. It was a bluff. I did not have the liquid funds to buy out everyone minority shareholders. But Victor did not know this, and the rest of the shareholders now saw that I was not going to give up. In business, confidence is often more important than real resources. The meeting ended after an hour. The vote on removal did not take place because Victor did not get the necessary votes. The pension fund looked at the numbers and decided that changing management in the midst of growth would be stupid. I won the first round, but the war was just beginning. Megan was waiting for me at the exit of the conference room. Dylan stood aside, pale, lost, not knowing where to put his hands. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice was trembling. Alone, please. I looked at the clock. In my office, 10 minutes later. She nodded and left. Dylan tried to say something, but I walked past him like an empty space. Rachel caught up with me in the corridor. Victor is already calling the lawyers, she said. He won T back down. I know, I answered. Start a deep audit of his activities. All transactions, all expenses, all contacts with external investors over the past 2 years. Do you think he is not clean? I think that a person with such a thirst for power usually does not disdain the means. Find me evidence. Rachel nodded and disappeared in the direction of the financial department. I went into my office, which I had not used for 2 years, and stood at the window. The city spread out below, bathed in the morning sun. The city where I lost everything and built everything again. The city where I found love and lost it. The door opened and Megan walked in. She closed the door behind her and leaned her back against her, as if she was afraid that I would kick her out if she came closer. 3 years, she said quietly. For 3 years you lied to me. I was silent. I thought I knew you. I thought that we were building something real, and you played with me. Tested me. All this time you looked at me and waited for me to stumble. No, I answered without turning around. I wanted you to. You loved me. Not money, not status. Me, and that's why you made a fool out of me? He got me into his company without saying a word. You watched me tell you about work, about bosses, and all this time you knew the truth. I turned to her. You called me a loser yesterday, Megan. In front of 100 people. In front of your lover who was holding you by the waist. You stood next to the man you've been sleeping with for 3 months and laughed at your husband. She opened her mouth to object, but the words stuck in her throat. I took a folder out of the desk drawer and put it on the table between us. Corporate correspondence, I said, my servers, my company. Everything is legit. Megan looked at the folder as if it was a bomb. 3 months of correspondence with Dylan Prescott, I continued. Hotel bookings on his corporate card, photos from business I didn't know, what didn't you know, that I'm not a loser? Is that why you're sorry? Because it turned out that the husband you betrayed is actually rich. She did not answer. And her silence told me everything I needed to know. clause 7.3 of our marriage contract, I said, proven infidelity, and the guilty party is deprived of the right to division of property acquired during the marriage. There is nothing to share. You can't do that, she whispered. I'm your wife. I corrected. 3 months ago. When you started sleeping with Dylan. She looked at me as if she was seeing me for the first time. And maybe that was the case. Maybe she looked at the mask for 3 years, not suspecting that underneath was a person whom she never tried to recognize. You received a notice from my lawyer, Sadie, check your email. She took out the phone with trembling hands. I saw her eyes running across the screen, absorbing the words that will end our marriage, and that's not all, I added when she finished reading, my lawyers found something interesting in your friend Dylan. But we'll talk about that later. She looked up at me, eyes full of fear. What are you going to do? I turned away. What I should. Megan left my office, and I was left alone with a view of the city that had built me anew after the first betrayal. Now I had to survive the second. And I was not sure that this time I had the strength to get up. I sat down at the table and opened the folder that the security service had prepared. 47 pages of documents that I had studied over the past week so carefully that I could quote them from memory. The correspondence between Megan and Dylan began innocently, with work questions and professional compliments. Then there were emoticons, then personal topics, then photographs. The first kiss happened at a conference when Megan told me that she was going to a 3-day seminar on digital marketing. There really was a seminar, but Dylan booked a hotel room for 2. I remembered that evening. She called me around 11 and said that she was tired after a long day and was going to bed. Her voice was strange, out of breath, and I chalked it up to fatigue. Now I knew why she was out of breath. For the next 3 months they met regularly. Business trips to Chicago, Portland, San Diego. Each time, Dylan wrote off expenses on a corporate card, disguising them as business trips. Hotels, restaurants, even a jewelry store in San Francisco. Dylan bought her earrings that I saw on her 2 weeks ago. She said it was a birthday present from a friend, $43,000 in 3 months. Pure corporate fraud. I closed the folder and looked at the clock. Noon. In an hour I had an appointment with Dylan Prescott, and he still didn't know why he was called. Rachel knocked and walked in uninvited, which meant breaking news. The video has reached 1 million views, she said, sitting down opposite me. Several major publications picked up the story. TechCrunch published an article under the headline, NextX mysterious founder revealed to be humiliated by husband in viral video. Journalists besieged the press office. I nodded, digesting the information. Publicity was inevitable, but I was hoping to buy more time. What do the comments say? Rachel allowed herself a slight smile. The mood changed. In the morning they laughed at you, now they admire you. The loser husband turned out to be a millionaire who hid his fortune from his cheating wife. The internet loves such stories. This is not a story, I answered, this is my life. The smile disappeared from her face. I know, Grant. Sorry, we were silent. In 5 years of working together, Rachel became the only person to whom I could show weakness without fear that she would use it against me. What about Victor? I asked, changing the subject. We started an audit, nothing concrete yet, but there are strange payments to a consulting firm in Delaware. 6 transactions in the last year and a half, each from $50,000 to $100,000. The company was registered a year and a half ago and has no public history. Dig deeper, I said. Victor is too smart to leave obvious traces, but too greedy not to leave any. Rachel nodded and stood up, but stopped at the door. Grant, I have to tell you something. I looked up at her. Megan is now in Dylan's office. They've been talking for 20 minutes. Judging by the body language, she is hysterical, and he is trying to calm her down. I felt something tighten in my chest. After all, part of me believed that Megan would come to me, admit her mistake and ask for forgiveness. Instead, she ran to him. "Let them talk," I answered in an even voice. "In an hour, both of them will have no time for talking." The meeting with Dylan was scheduled for 1 o'clock in the afternoon in a small meeting room on the 38th floor. I chose this place specifically, far from his office, far from prying eyes and quite private for a conversation that should not have been heard by no one outside. He walked in exactly at 1, still trying to maintain the appearance of confidence. $3,000 suit, 15 watch, handmade boots from Italy. I knew his salary, and it did not cover such a wardrobe. Another red flag that I noticed too late. "Mr. Wallace," he said, holding out his hand. I was surprised by the invitation. Usually the regional director does not meet with. He did not know how to finish the sentence. With the owner companies? With the woman's husband whom he fucked for 3 months? "Sit down," I said, ignoring the outstretched hand. He sat down opposite me, and I saw how his confidence began to crack. Yesterday he looked down at me and explained that real men earn their own money. Today he sat in the reception room of his employer and did not know what to expect. I put a folder with his financial statements on the table. He looked at it, and the color began to fade from his face. $43,000 in 3 months, I said calmly. Hotels, restaurants, jewelry. All written off as business expenses. Everything documented. He opened his mouth to say something, but I raised my hand. "I'm not finished. Corporate fraud is punishable by a fine of up to $50,000 and up to 3 years in prison. If the amount of damage exceeds $20,000, it automatically becomes a felony, Mr. Wallace," he began, his voice trembling. "I can explain." "No," interrupted I, "you can't explain. The explanations ended yesterday when you hugged my wife and called me a loser in front of witnesses. I didn't know that you were the owner of the company or that I was her husband, the second thing you knew perfectly well. That didn't stop you from sleeping with my wife for 3 months, who was paid for by my company." He was silent. All his ostentatious self-confidence disappeared, leaving before me a frightened man who realized that his career and, possibly, freedom were hanging on a hair's breadth. "You have 2 options," I continued. "First, I hand over these documents to the police. You will be arrested, tried and imprisoned. Your name will be in all the newspapers next to mine, and the story about the loser husband will turn into the story about the husband-lover. Second option, you write a letter of resignation of your own free will right now. Return the stolen money within 30 days and disappear from my company, my city, and the life of my ex-wife forever." He looked at me as if he did not believe his ears. "Will you let me go? I don't want to put you in jail, Dylan. Not because I regret it, but because a lawsuit will draw attention to the company at the most inopportune moment. We are preparing for an IPO, and we don't need a scandal with a criminal case. But if you choose the first option or try to somehow contact Megan after today, I will change my mind." He swallowed. "What will happen to her?" "It's none of your business," I replied. "It was never your business." 15 minutes later, Dylan Prescott signed a letter of resignation and a non-disclosure agreement that prohibited him from discussing the circumstances of his departure with anyone. He left the meeting room pale and silent. In the evening, the story of how the regional director was fired after a morning meeting will spread across all departments. No one will know the real reasons, but everyone will speculate. I returned to my office and closed the doors. For the first time that day, I allowed myself a moment of weakness. I sat down in the chair, closed my eyes and felt fatigue fall over me like a lead blanket. I won. Dylan left, Victor became quiet, Megan was left without legal trump cards. But why didn't I feel like a winner? Because winning over the people you loved always tastes like ashes. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. My lawyer's number, Grant. I heard the voice of Marcus Chen, who has been handling my legal affairs for the last 4 years. We have a problem. Megan has a new lawyer. Good. I've been waiting for this. Who? Elizabeth Morrow of Morrow Associates. I whistled. Elizabeth Morrow was one of the most aggressive family lawyers on the West Coast. Her specialty was getting the best out of clients in hopeless situations. Where did Megan get the money for Morrow? I asked. Her services cost from $50,000 per case. Good question, Marcus answered. Either someone is paying for her, or Morrow took the case on the basis of a percentage of the winnings. The second means that she sees a chance for serious money. The marriage contract is ironclad, I said. I checked it 3 times. There are no ironclad contracts, Grant. There are only contracts that talented lawyers have not yet tried to challenge. Morrow has already submitted a request for your financial documents for the period of pre-marriage. She is digging. What is she looking for? Marcus paused. Any lies, any distortions of facts. If she proves that you hid essential information from Megan before signing the contract, she can demand that it be declared invalid. I felt a chill run down my spine. 5 years ago, before Caroline's betrayal, I was on the verge of bankruptcy. Loans, debts, empty accounts. I got out of this hole, but traces remained in the documents. I never told Megan about this. She found information about bankruptcy, I asked. Marcus confirmed my worst fears. Yes. 3 months before your wedding. It was 2 years before the marriage, I answered. Feeling how the defense mechanisms turned on automatically, I restored the business on my own. This is not relevant. She will say that you pretended to be a successful businessman, but in fact hid a history of financial problems. That the contract was signed under false pretenses. I introduced myself as a freelancer working from home. I never told her about his money. Marcus sighed. Grant, I'm on your side. But Morrow will press on the fact that you systematically misled your wife about your financial situation. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of lies. A judge may consider this sufficient grounds for renegotiation of the terms of the contract. I put the phone on the table and stared out the window. The sun began to set, painting the sky in orange and pink tones. Beautiful. Indifferently beautiful. Megan went on the attack. I will not give up. Not her. And, or rather, not her lawyer. The woman who 3 days ago was sure that she would leave the marriage with a house, a car, and a solid allowance, now understood that she could be left with nothing. Driven into a corner, people are dangerous. And cornered people with good lawyers are doubly dangerous. The phone rang again, this time Rachel. Grant, her voice was tense. Victor just had a meeting with a representative of the pension fund, unofficially. I straightened up in my chair. How do you know? Our man in the reception area of the foundation. Victor was there for an hour and a half. He came out happy. What did he tell them? We don't know the details, but there are rumors. He accused you of falsifying financial statements. He said that the numbers you showed at the council do not correspond to reality. I felt anger rising inside, but I suppressed it with an effort of will. Anger would be weakness. Now I need a clear head. This is absurd, I said. The statements are checked by independent auditors every quarter. Victor suggested conducting an extraordinary audit. Rachel answered, the foundation is considering this proposal. Double blow. Megan attacked me through the court. Victor attacked through the board of directors. Coincidence? Hardly. Too precise a coincidence in time. Someone was coordinating their actions. And I had a suspicion that I knew who was paying for Megan's lawyer. I asked out loud. Rachel was silent. Do you think? Elizabeth Morrow is worth at least $50,000. Megan doesn't have that kind of money. But you know who could pay to create problems for me on two fronts at the same time? Victor, Rachel said, and in her voice I heard understanding. He is using your divorce as a smokescreen to attack the company. Find a connection, I said. Any transaction between Victor and the Moral Law Office. Any contact. I need proof. I'm working on it. I put the phone down and leaned back in my chair. Fatigue set in with renewed vigor. But now it's added to it. Something else. Not fear I burned out of myself a long time ago. More like a grim determination. Megan and Victor wanted war. They will get it. But first I needed a drink. I returned home around 9 in the evening. The house was empty. Megan, obviously, decided not to show up. I was grateful for that. I needed time alone with myself. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, an old single malt that I saved for special occasions, and sat down in the chair by the window. Behind the glass, the city lights were flickering, millions of little lives, each with its own dramas and tragedies. Mine was just one of many. There were photographs on the mantelpiece. Our wedding 3 years ago. Megan in a white dress, me in a suit that I wore for the second time in my life. Smiling as if they knew the secret of happiness. Honeymoon in Hawaii. She in a bikini on the beach, laughing, salty from the ocean. Last Christmas. She in stupid sweater with reindeer that I bought as a joke and she wore all evening. When did it all go wrong? I tried to remember the moment when her smile stopped reaching her eyes. When her touch became mechanical. When she began to look through me, and not at me. But my memory failed. The changes were too gradual, too imperceptible. Like rust that eats the metal from the inside, until one day the structure collapses. Maybe it was my fault. For 3 years I hid behind the mask of an ordinary person, not letting her know the real me. For 3 years she lived in shadows while the real me built an empire behind closed doors. I wanted to protect our relationship from money, but instead I poisoned it with lies. Or maybe she just never loved me. Maybe the waitress from the little cafe saw me not as a soulmate, but as easy prey. Someone who could buy her an education, a career, a life she couldn't afford. Maybe Dylan wasn't the first, just the first one I caught. I finished the whiskey and poured more. Alcohol didn't dull the pain, it only made it blurrier, like an out-of-focus photograph. Phone vibrated, a message from Rachel, found something on Victor. Not on the phone. Tomorrow in the office. I looked at the clock, almost midnight. Tomorrow will be a hard day. However, all days will be hard now. I got up and walked into the guest bedroom. The bed was cold and too big for one person. I lay in the dark and listened to the silence of the house, which for 3 years was filled with laughter, conversation, life. Now there was only emptiness. For the first time for many years I allowed myself to cry. Not out of self-pity, I long ago forgot how to feel sorry for myself. Out of grief. For the person she could have turned out to be. For the future we could have built together if we had both been honest from the very beginning. The tears ended quickly, they were replaced by a cold, calculating rage. Tomorrow I will begin to dismantle, brick by brick, everything that Victor and Megan are trying to build on my ruins. Tomorrow they will know why I came out of bankruptcy 5 years ago. Why I built a company worth $250 million. Because I don't give up. Never. The morning started with a cold shower and black coffee without sugar. I had not slept for more than 3 hours, but fatigue receded into the background, giving way to the concentration of a predator before the jump. Today was supposed to be the day of the retaliatory strike, and I prepared for it the same way I prepared for all the important battles of my life. Methodically, coolly, with no room for error. Rachel had been waiting for me in the office since 7 in the morning, although I did not ask her to come so early. On the table in front of her were 3 folders of different colors, and from the expression on her face I realized that she had also spent the night sleepless. "Let us start with the good," I said, sitting down opposite. She opened the blue folder and pushed it towards me. Delaware consulting firm, which was the last one Victor paid year, turned out to be a dummy. Registered to a nominee director, no real employees, no real services. The money was deposited into the account and through a series of transactions went to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I leafed through the documents, feeling a smile begin to stretch my lips. A classic scheme for withdrawing funds. Victor used his position on the board of directors to approve contracts with a shell company, and then took the money for himself. Simple, elegant, and completely illegal. How much total? I asked. Rachel opened the second folder, read, $470,000 in 18 months. This is only what we were able to track, perhaps there are other channels. I leaned back in the chair, digesting the information. Victor Lawrence, who just yesterday accused me of falsifying statements and demanded an extraordinary audit, stole almost $500,000 from the company. The irony was so thick that it could be cut with a knife, and now bad, Rachel said, opening the third folder, the yellow one. We found a connection between Victor and your wife's lawyer. I tensed up. Direct connection? Not exactly. Elizabeth Morrow received a payment of $75,000 from a trust registered in Nevada. The trust is owned by a company that is owned by another company, which is ultimately controlled by a holding company, of which Victor is one of the beneficiaries. 3 levels of protection, despicable, I said thoughtfully. He studied with professionals, or became a professional himself through years of practice. Rachel looked me in the eyes. Grant. That means that we suspected. Victor is coordinating the attack. He is paying for the divorce to distract you while he prepares a coup in the board of directors. I stood up and went to the window. The city stretched below, indifferent to my problems, as always. Cars crawled along the highway, people hurried about their business. The world continued to spin. And I stood here, in the glass tower that I built with my own hands, and thought about how many enemies a person can accumulate in 5 years of success. Has the pension fund already made a decision on the audit? I asked without turning around. The vote is scheduled for tomorrow. Victor is sure that he has the votes. I turned around. Call an extraordinary meeting of the board of directors for today, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Agenda: consideration of facts of financial violations on the part of one of the board members. Rachel allowed herself a smile, with pleasure. The next few hours turned into controlled chaos. The company's lawyers studied documents, preparing a presentation for the board. The security service was collecting additional evidence, including CCTV footage from Victor's office and his corporate email logs. The press service was preparing a statement in case information was leaked to the press. I sat in the center of this hurricane and felt a strange calm. For the first time in recent days I was in control of the situation and not reacting to someone else's blows. It was a familiar feeling, almost comfortable. The business war was territory that I knew. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon Marcus Chin called with news from the court. Morrow filed a petition to suspend the divorce proceedings until the verification of the circumstances of the marriage contract is completed, he said. The judge scheduled a hearing for next week. On what basis? I asked. Based on the fact that you allegedly hid significant information about your financial situation from your wife. She presented documents about your bankruptcy 5 years ago and claims that you deliberately misled Megan about your past. I misled her by working as a freelancer, turning out to be the owner of a multi-million-dollar company? I grinned. This is the strangest delusion I have ever heard of. Marcus chuckled. I agree, the argument sounds absurd. But Morrow is playing for time. The longer the process drags on, the more pressure on you, especially considering the publicity of the situation. I have a counter-argument, I said, and told him about the connection between Victor and payment for Morrow's services. Marcus fell silent for a few seconds. If you can prove that a third party is funding a lawsuit against you in order to influence a corporate conflict, this changes everything. The judge does not like it when his court is turned into an instrument of business warfare. I am working on the evidence, I replied. I will have more information this evening. After talking with the lawyer, I allowed myself a short break for lunch, which consisted of a sandwich from the machine and another cup of black coffee. My stomach protested, but I did not have time for a normal meal. The board meeting was approaching, and I needed to prepare. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Rachel came into my office with the final version of the presentation. We went through every slide, every document, every argument. Everything had to be flawless, because Victor was smart and experienced, and any weakness in our position would be his weapon. He already knows that we are preparing something, Rachel warned. His assistant called the secretary 3 times in the last hour, trying to find out the agenda of the meeting. Let him be nervous, I replied. A nervous opponent makes mistakes. At 3:55 I entered the conference room. The board members were already seated around the table, and I could feel the tension in the air. Rumors of an urgent meeting spread throughout the office, and everyone knew that something serious was happening. Victor Lawrence was sitting in his usual place to my right. His face was unreadable, but I noticed a slight twitching of the muscle under his left eye. A nervous tic that appeared in moments of stress. I've seen it before in negotiations that didn't go according to his plan. Grant, he said with feigned nonchalance as I took my seat. I hope this urgent meeting is related to something more significant than your family problems. Several people at the table shifted uncomfortably. Victor tried to set the tone, to show that he was in control of the situation. Typical tactics. I didn't buy it. Thank you for meeting on such short notice, I began, ignoring his comment. Today I will present information to the council about serious financial irregularities, which were discovered during the internal audit. I pressed a button on the remote and the first slide appeared on the screen. The logo of a Delaware consulting firm and a list of payments for the last 18 months. Strategic Advisors was incorporated in January of last year, I continued. During this time, Nextech paid it $477,000 for consulting services. The problem is that the company has no real employees, office, or business history. Victor did not move, but I saw his fingers curl on the armrests of his chair. Next slide, I said. A transaction chart appeared on the screen. The arrow showed how money moved from a corporate account to a fictitious company account, then to a series of intermediate accounts and, finally, to an offshore in the Cayman Islands. Our security service traced the path of the money, I continued. It settled in an account controlled by a beneficiary with a direct connection to one of the members of this board. The silence in the hall became almost palpable. Everyone looked at the diagram, then at me, then at each other. No one dared to say the obvious question. Victor stood up. This is an absurd accusation, he said loudly, but I heard a slight trembling in his voice. You are trying to distract the council from the real problems associated with your behavior and the reputation of the company. I allowed myself a slight smile. Next slide. Documents appeared on the screen. Registration data, offshore company, bank statements, notarized testimony of the nominee director of the Delaware company. Everything was neatly laid out. Every fact was documented. The beneficiary of the offshore account, I said slowly, looking into Victor's eyes. Victor Lawrence. Member of the board of directors of Nextech. The man who yesterday accused me of falsifying statements. The hall exploded with voices. Board members looked at each other. Someone leafed through copies documents that Rachel handed out before the meeting. Victor stood in the middle of this chaos, pale, motionless, like a statue. "It's a lie," he said finally, but his voice had lost all confidence. "These documents are falsified. You are setting me up to save your skin." I stood up and walked close to him. Close enough to see the drops of sweat on his forehead. Close enough for him to see in my eyes what I felt. "Victor," I said quietly, so that only the two of us could hear. "You paid for my wife's lawyer to get me into trouble while you were stealing from the company. It was smart, but not smart enough." He opened his mouth to answer, but I had already turned to the board. "I propose an immediate vote on two issues. The first is the removal of Victor Lawrence from his position as a member of the board of directors pending the completion of an independent investigation. The second is a forced buyout of his share of the company at the market price, as provided by the charter in the case gross breaches of fiduciary duty." The vote took less than 5 minutes. 6 votes in favor, 1 against. Victor Lawrence was suspended from office, deprived of voting rights until the investigation is completed. His shares will be repurchased by the company within 30 days. He left the conference room silently, without looking at anyone. I looked after him and did not feel satisfaction. Only fatigue and a strange emptiness where there should have been triumph. After the meeting, I was left alone in the conference room. Rachel took the documents. The rest of the council went away, discussing the incident in hushed voices. I sat in silence and looked at the city as it began to fall into darkness. The phone rang. Marcus Chen's number, Grant, news on the divorce case. I just received a copy of Morrow's petition. I listened to him lay out the legal details, but my mind was far away. Victor was defeated, but Megan was still fighting. Her lawyer found information about my bankruptcy and tried to use it to cancel the marriage contract. Even without Victor's funding, she could continue the attack if the judge accepted her arguments. "When is the hearing?" I asked, interrupting Marcus's explanations. "In a week, but I have an idea on how to finish this faster." "I'm listening," Morrow is playing to the public. "Her argument that you had financial problems sounds convincing only to those who do not know the details. The bankruptcy was 2 years before the marriage. You restored the business on your own. By the time of the wedding you were already a successful entrepreneur, so what?" And the fact that Megan married a man whom she considered a poor programmer, and found out the truth only now. If anyone was misled, then she was pleasantly surprised, and not deceived. The judge will understand this. I allowed myself hope, and betrayal, clause 7.3? Reinforced concrete, answered Marcus. We have correspondence, hotel bookings, financial traces. Morrow doesn't even try to dispute this. She is pulling out the contract because she knows that essentially she has nothing to show. So what should we do? Wait for the hearing and present all the facts to the court. Her argument about hidden bankruptcy will crumble when the judge sees the chronology of events. Argument about treason, Marcus paused. She had nothing to say. I thanked him and put down the phone. It was completely dark outside, and the city turned into a sea of lights. Beautiful. Cold. Indifferent. I returned home around 10 in the evening, expecting to find an empty house. But the light in the kitchen was on, and when I entered, Megan was sitting at the table with a glass of wine. She looked exhausted, having aged 10 years in the last 3 days. Grant, she said quietly. We need to talk. I took off my jacket and hung it on the back of the chair. Speak. She looked into her glass without raising her eyes. I found out about Victor. That he paid for my lawyer. I was silent, waiting for the continuation. I didn't know, Grant. I swear, I didn't know. Morrow came to me herself, offered to represent my interests. She said that she sees injustice of my situation and wants to help. I thought it was a professional interest, tears. But I didn't let them touch me. Tears were a cheap commodity, I sold them too generously in recent days. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry, Grant. I made so many mistakes. You slept with another man for 3 months, I answered in an even voice. You called me a loser at 100 people. You ran to your lover after finding out the truth, instead of coming to me. These are not mistakes, Megan. This is a choice. She shuddered as if from a blow. I loved you, she whispered. Once upon a time. I really loved you. Once upon a time, I repeated. But not now. And perhaps not for the last year. I just didn't want to see it. We sat in silence, which was heavier than any words. Two people who had shared a bed, dreams, and plans for 3 years were now strangers. Between us lay an abyss of lies, betrayal, and broken trust. What will happen next? She asked finally. Divorce, I answered. You won't get anything, because it's written in the contract you signed. But I won't pursue you. I won't tell everyone about your betrayal. I won't ruin your career. Why? She looked at me with disbelief, as if she was expecting a catch. Because I'm not you, Megan. Because revenge will not bring back the 3 years that I spent on a man who did not exist. Because I need to move on with my life, and not carry too heavy baggage. She stood up and came up to me. For a second it seemed to me that she wanted to hug me, but she stopped in her step, not daring to overcome the distance. You are a better person than me, she said quietly. I don't deserve this. No, I agreed. You don't deserve. She went into the bedroom, and I stayed in the kitchen with her unfinished glass of wine. The red liquid seemed almost black in the dim light. I thought about how strange life works. A week ago I was a married man, full of illusions of happiness. Today I was an almost divorced man, without illusions and without a wife. The phone vibrated, a message from Rachel. The press found out about Victor. Tomorrow there will be a storm. Are you ready? I typed the answer, ready. Thank you for everything. Then I finished the wine that left Megan, and went into the guest bedroom. Alone, like yesterday. Like all the nights that lay ahead of me. But today the emptiness pressed a little less. Maybe because I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Or maybe because I began to accept that this tunnel was part of the path, not a dead end. I closed my eyes and fell asleep without dreams for the first time in a week. The week before the hearing flew by in a whirlwind of events that at other times would have seemed unbearable. But now they were perceived as background noise. The press really created a storm after the news about Victor. The headlines were full of his name next to mine. Millionaire from a viral video exposed a fraudster from his own company. Loser husband turned out to be a genius of corporate intrigue. Nextech founder cleansed the board of directors of traders. Journalists loved beautiful stories of retribution, and my story fit perfectly into this format. Victor Lawrence disappeared from the public sphere the day after the meeting. His lawyers tried to negotiate a settlement, offering to return the stolen money in exchange for not prosecuting. I agreed, not out of mercy, but out of pragmatism. The trial would drag on for years and would distract me from preparing for the IPO. Victor returned $470,000, signed a non-disclosure agreement and sold his shares to the company at 15% below the market price. Justice triumphed, albeit in its imperfect, compromise form. Elizabeth Morrow withdrew from Megan's case 3 days after the news about Victor became public. The official reason sounded like a conflict of interest, but I knew the truth. Her reputation could not afford an association with a man who financed her services through fraudulent schemes. Megan was left without a lawyer a week before the hearing and was forced to hire someone simpler, someone who could not afford myself to refuse paying clients. The morning of the hearing was overcast, which seemed appropriate for the day that would officially bury my marriage. I put on the same suit I wore before the board of directors and looked at myself in the mirror. The man in the reflection looked older than a week ago, or maybe just more honest. The courtroom was small and functional, lacking the stately pathos that is shown in the movies. Wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, the smell of old paper and coffee from the machine. Megan was already sitting at the table with her new lawyer, a young man with a nervous look and a cheap suit. She didn't T-turn when I entered, but I saw how her shoulders tensed. Marcus Chen met me at our table with a folder of documents and a confident smile. Morrow left them a weak position, he whispered. The new lawyer is trying to salvage what he can, but he doesn't T it trumps. Judge Patricia Henderson entered the courtroom promptly at 9, and everyone stood up. She was a woman of about 60 with gray hair and a look that had seen too many divorces to harbor illusions about human nature. I read about her before the hearing. 30 years on the bench, a reputation as a fair but tough judge who did not tolerate manipulation and theatrical effects. The case is Wallace v. Wallace, the secretary announced. The hearing on the defendant's motion to invalidate the prenuptial agreement. The next 2 hours turned into a legal duel, where every word carried weight and every document could change the outcome. Megan's lawyer, whose name was Jason Kowalski, began with the argument that he had prepared Morrow. I allegedly hid from my future wife significant information about my financial past, namely a bankruptcy 5 years ago. He presented documents showing my debts and creditors' claims from that period, and argued that Megan would never have signed the contract if she had known this information. Your Honor, he said with feigned confidence, my client entered into a marriage with a man whom she considered stable and reliable. She did not know that his past included financial failure, which he deliberately hid. This is a classic case of misrepresentation. Judge Henderson turned to Marcus. Answer? Marcus stood up and walked to his seat with the slowness of a man who knows that time is on his side. Your Honor, let me clarify the chronology of events. The bankruptcy that my colleague is talking about occurred 2 years before my client met the defendant. By the time they met, he had already restored his business and was a successful entrepreneur. He did not hide past problems, he simply did not discuss them, which is his legal right, but he presented himself as simple freelancer. Kowalski interjected, he deliberately downplayed his status. Marcus smiled, and here we come to the most interesting argument of the defense. My colleague claims that my client was deceived because her husband turned out to be richer than she thought. She married a man whom she considered a modest programmer, and he turned out to be the owner of a company worth $250 million. If this is a fraud, then I would like to be deceived in this way by everyone day. Restrained laughter was heard in the hall. Even Judge Henderson allowed herself a slight smile. This is not funny, Megan intervened, breaking the protocol. She stood up, ignoring the attempts of her lawyer to sit her back. He lied to me for 3 years. For 3 years I did not know who I lived with. Defendant, please sit down. Judge Henderson knocked with her gavel. You will have the opportunity to speak. Megan sat down, but her eyes burned with rage, which I saw for the first time. Or maybe I always saw it, but did not want to admit. Marcus continued, Your Honor, let's talk about the real deception in this marriage. Not about hidden wealth, but about hidden infidelity. He opened the folder and began to lay out documents on the table. Correspondence, hotel reservations, financial records. 3 months of systematic infidelity with a work colleague. Kowalski tried to object, clinging to privacy, but Marcus countered, correspondence was conducted through the company's corporate servers belonging to Mito the client. And the monitoring was provided for in the security policy that the defendant agreed to when she was hired. The judge studied the documents for several minutes, and with each page turned, her expression became more and more stern. Clause 7.3 of the prenuptial agreement, Marcus said when she finished. Proven infidelity, and the guilty party is forfeited the right to division of property acquired during the marriage. Evidence of infidelity presented. The contract is valid. And must be executed. Kowalski tried to salvage the situation. Your Honor, even if we admit the fact of my client's relationship with a third party, this does not change the fact that the contract was signed under the influence of a misconception regarding the financial situation. Judge Henderson took off her glasses and looked at him with an expression of tired patience. Mr. Kowalski, let me make sure that I understand your position correctly. You claim that your client would not have signed the contract if she had known that her future husband went through bankruptcy 2 years before they met, but successfully recovered and became a multimillionaire. At the same time, you do not dispute the fact that she violated the terms of this contract by cheating on her husband for 3 months. Do I understand everything correctly? Kowalski opened his mouth, but could not find the words. The judge continued, I have seen many creative arguments in my court, but this one falls into a special category. The petition to declare the contract invalid is rejected. The contract is valid, clause 7.3 applies. The defendant has no right to the division of property acquired during marriage. Megan grabbed the table. This is unfair. He lied to me for 3 years. Judge Henderson looked at her for a long time. Mrs. Wallace, your husband did not tell you about his past. This can be called secrecy, but not a lie. You, on the other hand, actively lied for 3 months while maintaining a relationship with another man. The court finds no basis for renegotiating the terms of the contract. She turned to me. Mr. Wallace, do you have anything to add? I stood up. For the first time during the entire hearing, I allowed myself to look at Megan directly. She was crying. Mascara was smudged under her eyes. And at that moment she looked like that girl from the cafe I met 3 years ago. Tired, lost, desperately looking for a way out. Your part, I said, and my voice sounded smoother than I expected. I don't want to destroy my ex-wife. I'm asking the court to approve the terms of the contract. But I also want to note that I do not intend to interfere with her employment or disseminate information about the reasons for our divorce. She made mistakes, but I was not an ideal husband either. 3 years of lies, even with the best intentions, is also a betrayal of trust. The judge nodded. This is a worthy position, Mr. Voles. The divorce is approved under the terms of the prenuptial agreement. Property acquired during marriage and registered in the holding structure remains his property. Will answer, keeps personal property that belonged to her before marriage. The hearing is over. The blow of the gavel sounded like the final chord of a symphony that I did not want to hear. 3 years of marriage ended in 2 hours, in a gray courtroom, under fluorescent lights. Megan left the courtroom first, without looking back. Her lawyer trotted after him, muttering something about a possible appeal, but I knew that there will be no appeal. She had no money, no arguments, and no chance. Marcus shook my hand at the exit of the courthouse. Congratulations, Grant, a clear victory. I nodded, but did not feel what winners usually feel. There was relief, but underneath there was an emptiness that no court verdict could fill. The next 3 months became a time of recovery, although I did not immediately understand what exactly I was recovering from. The company flourished, the IPO was successful, the stock rose 30 on the first day of trading, and my fortune doubled on paper. Journalists wrote about me as a business genius who turned public humiliation into triumph. Megan. I lost her long before the divorce. I just didn't want to admit it. I didn't trust her from the very beginning, I finally said. If I had told the truth on the first date, maybe she would have left right away, and I wouldn't have spent 3 years on an illusion. Or maybe she would have stayed, and everything would have turned out differently. I will never know. And now I know that there is no point in hiding. Sooner or later the truth will come out. And it is better to control this moment than to let it take you by surprise. News about Megan reached me in fragments, through mutual friends and random mentions. She left Nextech a week after the divorce and moved to Phoenix, where she got a job at a small marketing agency. Her salary was 5 times less than in my company. Apartment, judging by the address she was at, did not share, was not in the best area. Dylan Prescott, her ex-lover, was selling cars at a car dealership in Fresno. His career in the technology sector was over forever. Corporate fraud and the wolf ticket from Nextech closed all the doors on him. To be among people who don't know my name, or a simple need for fresh air after a week spent in the office. I sat on a bench with a book that I bought a month ago, but never opened, and tried to read. Half an hour later, a woman sat down next to me. She was about my age, with short dark hair and a smile that seemed sincere. She was holding a glass of coffee in her hands and looked at the playground where the children were playing. "What are you reading?" she asked without turning her head. I looked at the cover of the book, "The story of a man who lost everything and found himself," I answered. She finally turned and looked at me with curiosity. "Sounds sad, rather liberating," I said, and for the first time in a long time I felt that I was telling the truth. She smiled. "My name is Olivia Grant," I answered. She didn't recognize my name. She didn't connected with the viral video, with Nextech, with a story that was on the front pages of technology publications for months. To her, I was just a man on a bench with a book he hadn't read. And I loved it. We talked for almost an hour, about books, about the weather, about how San Jose had changed over the past 10 years. She worked as an architect in a small firm and loved her job, although it didn't bring in much money. She had a dog named Chester, who was afraid of thunder and loved peanut butter. She laughed easily and sincerely, and her laugh did not remind me of Megan, which was more important than I was willing to admit. If you want to continue the conversation about books, call me. I took the business card and looked at it. Plain white cardboard, black letters, no decorations. Like herself. "I'll definitely call," I answered, and realized that I wasn't lying. She left, and I remained sitting on the bench, looking at the business card in my hands. Ordinary life flowed around me. Children played on the playground, dogs ran after balls, couples walked along the paths, holding hands. The world continued to spin, indifferent to my victories and defeats. I am often asked, "Do you have any regrets?" About what? About hiding the truth from Megan, about trusting her, despite past experience, about not noticing the signs of her betrayal earlier. I don't regret trusting. Without trust, we are just functions, mechanisms that consume and produce, but do not truly live. I trusted Caroline, and she betrayed me. I trusted Megan, and she betrayed me. But between these betrayals there were moments of real happiness, real connection, real life. These moments do not become less valuable because they ended in pain. I only regret one thing. I regret that I was wrong in here. I regret that my intuition, which has been whispering to me about problems for the last months, turned out to be right. I regret that the woman I loved turned out to be exactly what I was afraid to see in her. But pity is a luxury that I can no longer afford. There are new days ahead, new opportunities, a new life. And somewhere in this life, maybe there is a place for a woman with short dark hair and a sincere smile, who does not know how much my company is worth, and for whom it does not matter. I got up from the bench, put the business card in my pocket and went home. Sun was setting below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful. Not indifferently beautiful as before. Simply beautiful. For the first time in a long time, I looked at the sunset and saw not the end of the day, but the beginning of something new. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. If it caught your attention, if it made you think or evoked emotions, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so as not to miss new stories. Your like helps promote the video and show it to others people who might also like it. And now the question that haunts me. Grant hid from his wife for 3 years that he owns the company in which she works. He wanted to be loved for who he is, and not for money. But it turns out that he also lied to her all these years, albeit with the best intentions. Do you think Grant did the right thing by hiding the truth, or was his white lie the same betrayal of trust as her affair with her, Dylan? Write in the comments whose side you are on and why. I'm really interested in your opinion. See you in the next story.